I'm 19 years old. I want to build a business that I can sell by the time I turn 40. So that was actually a through goal.
All right, goal setting to something or through something. Because when we're goal setting through something, there's actually a lot more meaning and purpose to it.
It's like, how do I change the identity of who I am?
Because human beings will always act through whatever they associate themselves with. Your identity shapes your reality. And because you flex that identity muscle every day, we make the mistake of thinking, oh, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's the habit of how you show up as you. We can shift and change. We're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
We have the capacity to, transform ourselves. That's some of the great mystery of the mind.
Hi, I'm Candy Valentino, and for the last 25 years, I've been building businesses and generating wealth, starting my first business when I was just 19. Since then, I've gone on to build, scale, acquire, and exit businesses, all while investing in real estate and building financial freedom. Now it's all about you and why we're bringing you the real story behind building businesses and generating wealth here at the Candy Valentino Show. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the Candy Valentino Show. I'm so glad that you are tuning in to spend this time with me today. I have such a treat, and this isn't just a treat for you, honestly, it's a treat for me as we get to talk to someone who has been in his field prior to it becoming an industry. And we're gonna talk all about it as we have the honor and joy to really sit down today and talk with Todd Herman. Thanks so much for being here.
Candy Valentino, the lady who has a chihuahua that I just found out.
Exactly. Thanks so much for coming in and flying in to be with us today.
I'm excited for this, yeah.
It's so often that we meet people that, are some sort of a coach, but they're this coaching industry. They've been maybe for a year or two and they're trying to help people. And literally I said, you're like the OG. You've been doing this before it was an industry.
Yeah, I'm not going to take a moniker of an OG. However, because I think that there's a lot of people on the Mount Rushmore of my world. But yes, I started in 1997 before coaching was an industry, before there was federations and associations and things like this. Yeah. So it's like anything, and you know this, like when you're kind of one of the first ones in a space, it's pushing a very big boulder up a hill. But luckily, and this is kind of some of the stuff that we might talk about, I was just interested in it. I loved the chance I had to work with teenagers on their mental game. That's where I kind of started was with teen kids and building a mental game and peak performance coaching business.
Yeah. So I want to dial back because we're going to get into obviously best-selling book and working with the Black Mamba and all of these things that you've done, which is incredible. But let's pull back into what got you into this to begin with, because most people don't wake up 27 years ago and say, I want to help teenagers on their game.
No, I like to call myself an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't explicitly go out with this big vision and building some sort of big coaching or training business or something. I was a college football player, and I was a nationally ranked badminton player as well. So football, badminton, they always go together, right? And but I'm not physically gifted. I'm not 6'4" and 245 pounds of solid muscle. And I had two older brothers growing up on our farm and ranch where I grew up in Alberta, Canada. And so I developed some mental toughness skills having some older brothers, and it became part of my superpower as an athlete then. And because again, I was a bit scrawny and I could never put on like muscle mass as I was in high school, but I never let that be my limiter in my performance on that field. And so when I got done playing college football, I volunteered at a high school, and I started talking to the kids more about like game preparation and mental game stuff and, setting better goals for themselves, all the things that were kind of helping me. And they started getting some great results, not just on the field, but specifically in the classroom as well. This one kid went from being a 29% average in school, which was pretty much his entire life. He was a grade 11 student, to being on the honor roll within 6 months, because I was teaching them kind of like how the mind works, and like we can shape and shift ourselves very easily because of the way that we're structured. We're not trees. An acorn will always become an oak tree, but humans can shape and shift. And so they started getting these results, and parents started asking me if I could mentor their kids. And I'll never forget Debbie. She was the first one. And she said, hey, would you work with Kirby privately and work with him and help him out? He's a really good lacrosse player. And I said, yeah, happy to. And then there's like dead silence, kind of like right now. And then she leaned in and she's like, how much do you want to charge me, Todd? And I said, oh, how about $75 for 3 sessions? And that was my price for 3 years.
Wow.
Just making the big, if this is a wealth building show, I was making the big bucks, right?
I love it.
But these were all in-home sessions because this is 97. But I loved sport and I loved coaching and kind of empowering teenagers. That was my market at the time. And that's how it started, was just that.
I love that. So the accidental entrepreneur is fascinating to me because I know a lot of people that are.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm the one that was like, I'm going to build a business, all these things.
Yeah.
I got to build a customer base and hire employees. So when somebody is thinking, maybe they're watching the show, they're not yet an entrepreneur, but they feel like that calling, how did you then develop it into a business? Because there has to be a shift. Otherwise, it's just a hobby.
Candy, it's so much simpler now, I think. I think it's more simple, but then I think it's also very complex because if I was starting over right now, I can only imagine for some people how challenging it is to try and sift and sort through all the mountain of people who posture with, I've got the path for you. And boy, do I have the perfect framework model, whatever, like it's a business in a box, like all this kind of stuff. And I can only imagine that it can be difficult, especially with the scrolling and, who's right for me and things like that. So I am a very big believer in the fact that I do not know everything. I grew up on a farm and ranch, and I tell people that anytime there was a job to do that took all three of us boys, I knew that it was going to be a crappy job. Like it was hard labor stuff, and my older brothers would make me do the worst of it. I think that's my story. My older brother Ryan would probably tell me something different. But my point though is I never had the desire to become a farmer and rancher myself. So grateful that I got to grow up there because of the character traits that I was able to develop from my parents. But I'll never forget, my mom and dad sat me down before I went off because they knew that I was never going to return to the farm again when I went off for college. And they said, whatever you go out and do in life, like we'll probably not be able to help you in that, giving you advice because we know this world. But hopefully we've set you up with the right foundation of character traits and integrity and things like this, which by the way is the most important part of that entire process. And they said, but whatever you do, go out and find whoever's the best at it and learn from them. But they were very explicit. They said, just don't settle for anything less than the best. And that just is, I'm 48 now and that still replays in my mind because I'm not done learning from other people. And so I learned from people way further ahead than me. And so I tucked myself underneath their wing. Even though I did have my little entrepreneurial venture, I wasn't afraid to go and mentor underneath somebody. And so one of my first major mentor in my industry was Harvey Dorfman, who wrote the Bible of the mental game world called Coaching the Mental Game. He's known as the Yoda of baseball. He's just an absolute legend. And I cold outreached him. I was a couple of years in, and I can't say that I had a really great business. I had a good practice, and that can be just enough.
Sure. Absolutely.
But I had, I was just busy doing a lot of one-on-one coaching work. I'd done some trainings and workshops for other people, but I probably wasn't very good at it. I was very good at the one-on-one stuff, not as good at delivering to like larger groups, I don't think. Or maybe I'm just being hard on myself. But I reached out to him because his book was the only one that really made sense to me. All these other books on psychology, I'm like, this stuff, like I played sport at a pretty good level. And if I did any of the stuff that's in these sports psych books, I would be overthinking out on that field or on that court. And then Harvey comes along and I read his and it's so pragmatic and practical and, very much born out of real experience working with elite human beings. And so I cold called, left a voicemail. He called me back and his first words were, "You don't want to live with me, kid, do you?" Because I was saying, hey, can I come down there and can I volunteer and help you clean up your office or do some research for you? Because I'm sure you've got another book and all this. And after some back and forth, he agreed. And I went and spent 33 days with him in North Carolina. Wow. Stayed at a Motel 6 for $28.50 a night. Maxed out my Scotiabank Visa credit card because I wasn't making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But my point being, back to your question, is I would say to some people, not everybody, look for someone that you can tuck yourself under the wing of. Because if you do choose that, I think one of the best messages you can send to yourself is, and whether you believe this or not about yourself, because I know that some people can struggle with how they see themselves, but just don't settle for anything but the best. Like, it's the best way that you can treat yourself. Because I think it's like a real message to this internal core of your soul that despite the fact that you might have some head game issues, at least you're taking actions that sends a different type of message to your inner core part. So, you know, do whatever you can to try and get yourself around people who are the best at their craft or in their business. And if you can tuck yourself under their wing, that's one way. Or when I say tuck yourself under their wing, not mean going and working for them necessarily, but read their books or, you know, follow some of their content and get around their world.
Yeah. I love you. So basically, you reach out to this guy, you're working for free. This is what I think, I want to capture this because a lot of people will miss this. They want the mentor, but they don't want to do any of the work, right? Though I'm sure you've got DMs, I get tons of them too. Well, can I come pick your brain? Can I come do this? Will you mentor me? But very rarely do people want to give on the front end, knowing that you can't even measure. Like those 33 days paid such an ROI, you can't even measure it.
That was 15 years of experience in 33 days.
That's crazy.
Because the very first session with Harvey, so I was there for about 8 days. And the way that Harvey worked was he would always go and work for a Major League Baseball team during the regular season. But his contract would only start in February during the spring training camps. And so from February until whenever that team was either done regular season or out of the playoffs, then he was done, so that he had about a 4-month window where he could do one-on-one work with other players. Because if he's with the San Diego Padres, he can't be coaching Roy Halladay with the Toronto Blue Jays. You know, conflict, obviously. So these guys would make this pilgrimage down to his house in North Carolina or wherever he was. And so on the 8th day, Roy Halladay came in and Harvey said to me, I was actually planning on just staying at the hotel the motel that I was at, not hotel. And he's like, well, do you want to come in and sit on the session? And I was like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
Like, I get to be with this legend talking to this. I think Roy had just won the Cy Young for the best pitcher in the league. So went in, sat there in the back and just watched. And I was blown away at what was actually the conversation. So all these things, I thought, okay, well, he's going to be working with him more on his visualization skills. He's going to be working with him on like some sort of emotional regulation and relaxation and concentration. No, Roy had a lot of those skills already. It was more about managing the off the field stuff so that it didn't impact the on the field performance. And then the next day, Andy Pettitte came in, and the next day, Craig Biggio, and like all these legends in baseball.
Wow, you're probably like a kid in the candy store.
Are you kidding me? And I'm sitting there watching Harvey work, and it was incredible because we had a very similar little bit of a personality type, I think, Harvey and I. And there was one time, I won't say who the player was, but he was complaining about some issues with his wife and how it was affecting kind of pre-game prep. And he was kind of going on and on about it. And Harvey says to him, and stop being such a wow. Now, again, you can edit that part out or you can bleep it, whatever you want on the show. But I'm saying like the way that he would set them straight.
Yeah.
Because he would let them kind of give them a platform to talk about it. And then he would just, okay, you're done. Because then he would level them back up. I saw him do it where he would level them back up to an identity. So he'd coach them back up to this, like, that's not who you are. Really? Like that? You think that you're playing a game of someone who cannot manage relationships well. But, and then he'd insert example of throughout the past year of when that player had demonstrated amazing relationship boundary skills and things like that, so that he could see himself in a different way in the context of that relationship that he was struggling with. Like, it was like, I was sitting there going, I feel like I'm watching Yoda work, but I need to unpack this more. So what that gave me a power to do was not be afraid to throw punches in a session.
Yeah.
So people nowadays, we have this vernacular of holding space and this is a safe space. And it's like, really? like the world is walking around on eggshells because you're emotionally unregulated. Like you can't go out into the world and be slightly triggered because someone didn't hold a door for you or whatever. Like best of luck. Like the entire world now owns the psychology between the 6 inches of your ears. Like you got to level up, folks.
So good.
Like people on social media scrolling. I don't like the word that Candy just said today, so I'm going to just keyboard jockey it up. And it's just, what a terrible way to live.
What is that? What is lacking, or what do they have, or what haven't they developed that they're so triggered by that one thing that they feel the right or the desire to go do something like that?
Candy, one of the things that's most underappreciated about developing ourselves is actually the words personal development and self-help. Okay. So by themselves, those terms don't necessarily hurt us, but they can trap people inside the idea that everything's about Todd has to do the work. Like it's all of my own internal combustion and energy that's got to make me better. One of the most underappreciated parts of creating success for ourselves is our ecosystem around us. It is our environment. And this goes back to the great wisdom that my parents gave me. Tuck yourself under the wing of the best, because it's that osmosis that can level you up. And so me sitting in that room with Harvey and all those other players is going to help me level up through osmosis. And I didn't even do anything. I'm just literally sitting here observing two legends having a coaching conversation. So I say that gets back to your question. What's going on there? We've got a culture and a society that has made it okay for people to confront everybody. Starts on social media. And now, because people were like, social media and the real world aren't the same thing. And while I agree, they are starting to become closer and closer to mapping over. Why? Because we flex a muscle of habit or routine of being the angry person that's on the comments. And then we wonder why, when we go out, we're so quick to confront someone at whatever the local store is or the Starbucks because they didn't quite put enough whipped cream on my mochaccino. That's not how I like it. Don't you know? So it's people aren't even paying attention to the fact that it's now part of culture and society, that it's okay to do this stuff.
Gosh,
That we're so emotionally unregulated because it creates an environment where it's okay to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so in my family, I got 3 little kids. I need to ensure that it's my responsibility to let them know that that's not okay. Like, don't let the world into your mind and have it rule you like a little invisible puppet master pulling your strings.
Yeah.
Like that's a part of some of the work that I'm doing with, whether it's the entrepreneurial, the CEO clientele or the athletic clientele that I've had over the years, is finding those invisible strings. I talk about it in the book that I have about what are those invisible strings that are plucking you and making you kind of behave this way? Because it helps me disassociate that person to say, no, I actually don't think it's you. Like, I don't need to fix you. There's something around you.
Yeah.
And even that disassociative kind of banter, it relaxes people and are like, oh, like, I'm not screwed up. It's like, no, your results are screwing up for you. But the cause of it might not be actually you. It's some sort of permutation that's being fed through you that you're not even realizing. Could be your history. It could be the people around you. It could be literally just where you work every day. It's just not conducive to you getting the results that you want.
Yeah.
So let's look at changing your environment in some way.
Yeah. I read a study once, you talked about work, that within 5 feet of the people that you work in cubicles, you have a 25% chance of picking up their personality traits just because you sit by them. Doesn't matter your upbringing, doesn't matter your history, your background, or anything. Yeah. And to me, that's so fascinating because we're really 5 feet from everybody on social media. Yeah. So it's a lot of what you're sharing. But you said something about taking someone, going under their wing, finding a mentor. But you said something fascinating before we started recording.
Oh, please tell me. I need to know when I say something fascinating.
You said that know, like, and trust is bullshit.
Yeah.
So to me, that means, well, when you're finding a mentor, it's not necessarily someone you know, like, and trust. What should you look for? So
yeah, like I think about like my early career, and it was my older brother, Ryan. Like my older brother, Ryan, he was far more a natural leader than I was. Like I really had to work at developing my leadership skills. I was like, again, a superpower was I was super highly competitive. And that's what allowed me to have some success. But maybe I wasn't the best at being a great like teammate with other players. But Ryan was like world class at it and still is. And so he was just graduating from university and he was heading back to take over the farm and ranch. And Ryan pulled me aside because he saw me kind of struggling with even my business in some way, because I was getting in my own way and not really selling it and marketing it the way that I needed to. And he said, you know what, Todd, you care so much about other people's goals that you end up not caring about your own. And I was like, and it was not really, it was kind of a passing comment because he was kind of leaving the living room in our crappy little 1-bedroom apartment that we had, or 2-bedroom apartment that we had in Edmonton. And I was like, it sort of just hit me and I was like, yeah, but what's behind that? And it was that I really cared so much about how other people thought of me. And so, okay, does that person like me? Does that person like me? And it really ruled a lot of what I did in my behavior. So I like finding phrases in our vernacular that we use, because a big part of, coaching people through the mental game work that I have over the last 27 years is our language creates our world. So our choices of words that we use every day and the choices of words that we engage with every day can either trap us or free us, help us unleash capability and performance, or, hold it back and stifle it. And so I look at know, like, and trust. It's used forever in business. Why would you object to that, Candy? And I'm like, well, it makes sense that in order for me to buy something from Candy, I need to discover you. So that's know. I need to know you. I don't know how deeply I need to know you. Do I need to know that you have a Chihuahua? Maybe, that's cool. Trust, that makes sense. But I've also purchased things from people that I didn't know if I trusted the brand or whatever. It's just, that's what I needed in that moment. So, but that's helpful. The more trust you build in a market, that's going to make it easier. But I just did not index towards liking, because there's a lot of things that I've purchased that I don't know if I liked the leader or liked the company or something like that. So I don't think it's KLT, know, like, trust, from my observations. And then again, this is through conversations with thousands of people, unpacking. Like I don't want to give you my idea. I want to ask you some questions and then see how you actually, purchase things, or why you end up going with this vendor over that vendor. And there's a different letter that goes in there. It's KRT. It's know, respect, and trust. And even Warren Buffett talks about it as well. He doesn't kind of pack it that way. And maybe there's a baby L. And the baby L is like a little cherry on top. And then if we know someone and we respect them and we trust them, and then there's a little cherry on top that's and we end up liking them. But it's not the meat and potatoes of that entire equation. And I say that because I think that the way that so many people try to, whether it's bring content in the world or bring their market in the world, they're like, oh, is our audience going to like this? And when you index towards liking, you end up putting out content in the world or ideas into the world that are just fundamentally poor.
Yeah.
Safe spaces is one. Who could argue with that, Todd? Creating a safe space for people. It's like, I have literally become one of the top mental toughness coaching companies in the world. It was the biggest when I sold it to Real Madrid in 2014. We had 2 million athletes a year going through our training programs before Real Madrid bought it to put it into what was their new human performance university. And one of the last things I'm caring about when I'm trying to build mental toughness with people is whether or not I have carved off every little spike and poke and prod and struggle and stress for someone, because it's through that stuff. Just think about our own lives. We develop mental toughness typically through doing challenging things.
Yeah.
It wasn't about making sure that I threw you into a padded room and made it okay.
Right.
So these terms, safe space, people are going to like that. And we sit around and we talk about messaging all the time. How can we make this message completely completely defensible in the market. And I'm like, no, I want to put out some stuff sometimes that's like a punch to the face to some people. And again, I can say that now and I can sit inside of it because I don't care, Candy, if everyone that's watching your show today really likes me. But what they can't argue with is the massive depth of experience that I have working with people at an elite level on their inner game to help them achieve whatever it is that they're trying to go after, which is typically something that's very difficult.
I love that. And I love that about you because I'm so similar in that regard. My little saying is I will never trade respect for attention.
That's great.
And I think if you, especially in this social media world, if you go through that lens of not just trading quick likes, quick attention, engagement for the respect of you as an individual, especially as a female being in this space, I think that we need, like you said, words matter. We need a few things that anchor us so that we don't get pulled down into the shiny objects and the distraction of all of these softening, where it's softening our society is what's happening. And it's a really scary thing that's happening. Now I'm literally, this is a little bit for me, guys. I want to unpack the work that you do with athletes and how you've created these personas, this alter ego and this identity. Because as somebody myself, like I was in the business world 20 plus years, had a certain identity in a certain community, moved across the country. Like there's a lot of people that struggle with that. They might be doing something and then they want to shift or change. And it's like, how do I change the identity of who I am? And even know who you are in like a second act or another business or something like that. Is there a process that if someone's watching right now and they're like, wow, that's kind of like me. I know that we have a lot of those people in our viewer audience, that you can help them as far as how do you start to develop that? What are some of the first steps?
Well, as a matter of fact, Candy, there is a process. I just wanted to do my radio voice.
And it's in your book.
And by the way, folks, it's in the Alter Ego Effect, Breaking the Fourth Wall. So let's go first to like where I kind of index towards. So I'm building this mental game and performance company. And then in the early 2000s, I started to see that one of the fastest ways I could help clients get results was when I didn't just try to give them new routines and new methods and teach them something that they would then try and, like a Lego block, like block on or latch on to kind of who they are right now. It was easier if I went right to the core of this particular field that we're trying to go and win on. Could be the ice rink, could be the football field, could be the tennis court. Like when we look at that field, and then I say, and there's an art to what I'm doing right now in that when I'm trying to get someone to build a new identity for themselves, I want to help create opportunities to disassociate in some way. So what I mean is we're just looking at this thing and it's the field of play over here. So for this field, and then when we look at what does that field need from you to go and win on it? Like who's the person that we need to build to go and win on that? Okay, which is the identity of someone. So that was what I was discovering was like, when I worked with people at the identity level and we were custom building an identity to win on that particular field with that role that they had, wide receiver, quarterback, tennis player, swimmer going into the pool, whatever, the person was able to like kind of more thoughtfully think about, like there is two sides of me. There's the one that walks around in kind of regular everyday life, and then there's the one who goes out there and competes. And so that's what I need. I'm like, because I need them to realize that there's many selves that we have. And so that's what we do. We build out that identity, and that became very successful. So I started to become known as the fixer or the quick hit guy. I could come in very rapidly. And if someone was playing in the US Open at Flushing Meadows on Saturday, but they had been struggling through the ATP tour over the last 3 months, and it was a Wednesday, I'd get a call and say, hey, can you come out and talk? And because I'm working with you at the identity level and all of our habits, behaviors, beliefs, attitudes are stacked on top of our identity, because human beings will always act through whatever they associate themselves with. Your identity shapes your reality. So when I change the identity of the person who's going out there to perform and compete, their performance can change really rapidly. So then apart through that process, I'm now starting to work with more and more elite athletes and more professionals or Olympians. And the best of the best would talk about having a persona, a character, an alter ego, secret identity that they would use as their source of inspiration for how they want to show up out there. And for me, I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. I did the exact same thing when I played football. I had Geronimo. Geronimo was a composite of Walter Payton and Ronnie Lott, two of my heroes in professional football, and then a tribe of 5 Native American warriors, where I grew up in Alberta, Canada, rich with Native American history. And I used to ride around on my horse Crackerjack looking for fire rings to see if I could find some old artifacts like arrowheads or something like that on our big farm and ranch. I would always be like, oh, that's really cool, Candy. You have an alter ego, like, or you have a persona. I did the same thing. So it was really just, I wasn't doing anything more than just in our coaching conversation, just having a convo about that. Didn't even clue in yet until an athlete said to me their persona. And then I was like, 36 other conversations, just like dominoes toppled together finally. And I'm like, wait, this is a thing. And so I started interviewing all my clients and I started developing the method that I talk about in the book, the alter ego method, which is really about helping you custom build an identity that's going to help you win on that field. So that
whatever that field may be,
whatever
business,
it is,
investing.
going back to your point about like people are trying to make a shift. That's one of the biggest reasons why people will leverage an alter ego, is because you spent 20 years creating this particular sense of self in your corporate career. And because you flex that identity muscle every day, we make the mistake of thinking, oh, that's me. But no, that's the habit of how you show up as you. And so, and that was a very useful identity for you to help you get whatever results you were getting in that corporate career, right? It was useful. And so when we actually think about things in life that we do every day, it's useful to help us achieve some sort of goal. Now someone goes, wait a second, Todd, I'm not achieving some of my goals right now. And I'm like, no, but the goal that you, the way that the results that you're currently getting, because our brains are goal seeking, they're teleological, they're constantly moving towards some sort of target. Even if you don't have a target right now, your mind is inventing one. And so the way that you show up right now is a very useful version of you to hit this current results that you've got. So now let's just change that. So that identity that you had was useful to help you in that career. But now it's like, okay, wait, let's just stop. Because remember, we can shift and change. We're human beings. We have the capacity to, transform ourselves. So now in this new career that you have, Candy, in this domain, what's that new version of you that we can bring? And we can borrow some of the qualities from this, corporate Candy. And so now this new version of you, how do you want to show up there? What didn't you like about some of the ways that you could have felt trapped in that corporate world? Like, did you feel, I've got way more creative energy. And I didn't feel as creative. So in this new, I want to make sure that I'm more creative. I'm like, great. So creativity is one of the core attributes and traits of this new version of you. Anything else? And we list off some of these traits and abilities, attributes, and I talk about all this stuff in the book. And then I go, great. Next step is, because now we're kind of building up what I call like the source code. So when I'm showing up on that field of play out there, I want to be creative. I want to be resilient. I want to be strong. I want to be more playful. I want to have more fun. I want to be more decisive or more confident. 4, 5, 7, whatever those traits are. And then it's like, is there anyone or anything that already kind of exhibits some of those traits and behaviors for you? And the reason that's important is when you think about how our brain is, a lot of it is dedicated to the visual cortex. And so if we're trying to move towards a goal, and this could be the goal of what I'm trying to become, and I don't have a clear vision or picture in my mind of what that is, it's hard to stay either consistent with it or engaged with it or excited about like, oh, this is what I can become. I can become more like insert Oprah, insert Martin Luther King, or insert Mr. Rogers, because he's one of my source codes of inspiration for who I want to be as a dad. Okay, because he's the exact opposite as the challenger type that I bring to the coaching or the training that I work with my clients on, because I need to, because I work with some pretty large egos that are coming to me and I have to challenge them, just like my mentor Harvey showed me when he was working with people. So he was a great model in my mind for how I wanted to move as a coach through my career. So now I have this picture in my mind with this source of inspiration of who I want to be more like. And now my mind has a good picture. And Epictetus, the great philosopher in before 0 BC, said, adopting the characteristics and manners of someone else, there's nothing false in this. We all need a point of reference in order for us to become more of who we are. There's nothing fake about. And it's so true. Like, because I'm not going to be a perfect model of Harvey. There's still other parts of me.
Sure.
But he's a very useful point of reference for me to become a coach. Or Mr. Rogers, you know, like how he would always get down on one knee and get down on the eye level of the kids, and just even the way he held his hands. And it was a very passive stance, which most parents, they come home and they say things like, Todd, I have a hard time turning it off. I was a hard charger, I was a high achiever all day, or, you know, like I was managing people, and then I come home and I do the exact same thing. And I'm like, yeah, because you haven't custom built the identity for who's going to be in that home. Let's build that identity. So that's some of the work that I did at Fort Bragg with the United States military, was working with Army, like Rangers and Green Berets, and you guys have a uniform that carries with it 150 or 200 years of story and meaning around it. And then there's a credo and a motto of what it means to be a Green Beret or an Army Ranger or insert name of whatever group. And then you put on that uniform. And there's a term I talk about in the book called enclothed cognition. And enclothed cognition is that we as human beings add story and meaning to the world around us, including articles of clothing or even artifacts. Lipstick can be one. And what happens is when you put on that article of clothing, Batman's cape or Mr. Rogers' sweater, or one that looks like it, or a white doctor's coat, you will enclose your mind in the cognitive traits and abilities of whatever story you have about that thing. So you will naturally become more detailed, methodical, careful, and smart if you put on a white doctor's coat. And that's kind of the meaning you have around wearing a doctor's coat. And you didn't train yourself on being more detailed, methodical, careful, or smart. You will just naturally do it. That's some of the great mystery of the mind. And that was where I always anchored my training companies around is, I'm not here to posture with a bunch of bullshit ideas that have been passed around through personal development, self-help world from people who've never done the work. I am in the trenches every day. And I have been for 27 years, almost coming up on 20,000 hours of one-on-one coaching time. Not group coaching, not standing on stages, not training. And Candy, if you and I are having a private conversation about what's really going on and what's blocking you from getting out there and doing the thing that you want to do, or not performing to the level that you want, there's a lot of things that you're going to share in that trust that we have that's very different than if you're on a group Zoom call. Or you're in a conference room and you're coming up to a mic. Now you might have some people who might be vulnerable in that moment, but not everybody is going to tell you. And so I just kept on, look, why does this work so well? What's the science of why when I get my athletes and clients to wear a uniform or use a totem or an artifact, what's allowing that to unpack more of that? So then we're testing, and I'm going back to science. What's going on over here? So enclosed cognition was one of those just fascinating little psychological triggers that we all have in us. So I'll say this, going back to what you were saying about how can someone who has the aspirations of being an entrepreneur right now but isn't taking action, what if you started to create a specific uniform, or you bought a specific uniform that's your entrepreneurial uniform that you put on to show up as that identity of someone who is taking action to realizing your dream or goal of owning your own thing. And the moment you find yourself not acting through that entrepreneurial self, you got to take it off. Now, I'm not saying strip down nude if it's an entire uniform, but if it's a pair of glasses, like I did. I was 21 when I started the Peak Athlete, and I looked like I was 12. This is where you're supposed to say, "Oh, you still look young, Todd."
You do still
Come on,
look young,
Candy.
Todd. Come on.
I'm fishing for a compliment. No, but I was super insecure about the fact that I looked so young, and I also had these rules in my head that anyone who goes up and talks about the mental game, you have to have at least 3 best-selling books. That was literally not 1, 3.
3.
3. Because some people that I followed had like 3 books.
Yeah.
And then, I also need letters behind my name. I need to have like 2 PhDs or like just Todd Herman with a bunch of letters behind it, which wasn't true. And then it would get in the way of me actually marketing this little fledgling practice.
So some of the beliefs you have to drop. Some of the things that you think you need for the identity, you have to drop, is what I'm hearing. Like the letters, the best-selling books, all of that. But not having an identity is going to keep you stuck in what you are and what you're already doing. And it's interesting you said 21. I was 19 when I started my first business.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I did exactly what you're talking about. I wore a black suit, pantsuit, blacker than this, every single day of my life for 15 years.
Yeah.
Because I was 19 and I was hiring people that were twice my age. So as a female, there wasn't much I could do facial hair or anything. Like guys can make themselves older. So I wore a black suit and I carried a briefcase instead of a purse every single day.
Okay, I'm going to go back to a funny story where people are going to judge me on it from when I was in elementary. But I'll finish this one off. And so I was insecure, but all of the smartest kids I grew up around in my small little farming community of Schuler, Alberta, shout out Schuler. Literally, there's only 82 people who live there. So like...
They all saw it.
They all are going to see this. They all had glasses. Mark Volk, James Hagel. Brilliant, smart guys. And so I had this association that people who had glasses were just smart. So I went out and I bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. Now, I didn't go out, Candy, to invent a new Todd, because the version of me that was the coach, I didn't really have a lot of issues around me being the coach. Because the one thing that can get you past some of maybe your own lack of experience is whether or not you actually care about your clients. And I out-cared many other people who had 25 years experience because I loved working with teenagers and I was so good at building rapport with them. And that creates that space where now they have trust and I can get to like helping them.
Yeah.
Okay. So I went out and I bought a pair of non-prescription glasses and I used them to build the part of me in my business that I needed, which was the sales and marketing Todd. And I called him Super Richard.
Okay.
And I know that this part resonates with a lot of people because many people can be carrying around stories of where they come from or who they are. People can call them traumas, whatever, that are hurtful and hold you back. And I did. And whether it was self-worth issues or a lack of belief that I could even see this thing grow bigger than me just working with some young kids one-on-one. And Super Richard was hired to be the advocate for Todd's stuff. And I say it that way because he really was. He was hired to specifically carry the weight of putting myself out there. And Super Richard, he cared about getting Todd's vision and goal of, making an impact with young teenagers out there. Because Super Richard recognized that Todd cared, but he had a hard time getting on calls and putting himself out there and possibly getting rejected. So when I put on those glasses, I was adopting the characteristics and traits of 3 of my heroes. Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Power of Myth, The Hero's Journey, all these amazing things. I saw him in a Bill Moyers PBS special when I was 13 and just thought this guy's the most articulate person I've ever seen. And I wasn't articulate, so I needed that trait. And then Superman, decisive, man of action. I was the man of inaction, right? Went to bed, put my head on the pillow every night, lots of ideas as to how I was going to show up tomorrow. And then I'd end my day not doing those things that needed to happen to move my business forward. And so I wanted to be a man of action. And then finally, Benjamin Franklin. I've read his biography, and by that time I'd read it probably 7 times. But I thought, man, this human being reinvented himself and had 7 incredible careers in one lifetime. Like, the confidence to be able to do that is so inspiring. So I wanted to be more confident. And those were the ways that when I'd put on those glasses, I was Super Richard. No, I didn't get on calls and say, hey, this is Super Richard calling for. No, I was still Todd. Like, that's the name I would introduce that way. But what I was acting through was Super Richard, adopting the mannerisms and traits and characteristics of other people so that I could realize something about myself. And then 6 months later, I made I booked 2 speaking gigs for myself. And I looked down at my desk and I felt so good about like what I just done. And my glasses were sitting on my desk. I had finally become that. I'd finally gotten past that issue of being concerned about what other people were thinking about me, or, not describing myself as being good at sales or communication or marketing or whatever. And I'd finally become that. And Cary Grant, the great Hollywood golden era actor, he talks about this in an interview at the end of his career. And he came from Bristol, England, single mom, and came from nothing. He wanted to make something of his life, and he wanted to go do it in Hollywood. So he changed his name to Cary Grant, and he did struggle with like depression throughout his life, but he mastered it. And he said at the end of his career in an interview, I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be until I finally became that person, or he became me. But at some point, we met. And that's literally what I'm constantly doing with this method with people, is using identity as a useful way to help you navigate difficult things in life, helping you achieve aspirations, helping you move past some sort of things that are holding you back, what perceptions you have about what you think you're capable of, or people from my town can't do it, or people from, my small village can't do this kind of thing. And, well, that's going to trap this current identity. But there's another version of you that we can create that can go out and win. Who's that? What's their source of inspiration? What does that look like? And let's go do it.
So fascinating, because really it all comes down to, once you have the identity, the behavior and the habits eventually become who you are. So it becomes that identity, becomes your reality through doing the reps, showing up as that person over and over and over again.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Which is no different than how you and I are showing up right now, right? So like, I always look at I call it looking at the game film. Everything I do is a sports performance approach. Like, I have a entrepreneurial training company called 90 Day Year, and it takes the same sports performance principles that we use with athletes, and I bring it into the business world, and we install it inside of businesses as the performance system or operating system for how your business grows. So it keeps you at peak performance level, keeps you out of burnout and overwhelm, and keeps you in a state of flow, which is basically the stuff that I've been working on for 27 years with people. So going back to exactly what you said, it's this, we are helping people constantly evolve and kind of just see that, what I was going to say was, doing the reps, even this, I will take a look at my game film from this week. I rewatch at least 3 hours of my coaching calls, and I don't do only one-on-one coaching, by the way. Like, I don't, but I still keep hours in my week available to that, because it keeps me close to the field of play, right? Like, what's actually happening out there? What are people struggling with? That's why I can see some of these social traps, cultural traps that people are engaged in that they don't even realize is one of those strings that's blocking them from moving forward. So concerned about what someone's going to say about them on Twitter. Like, it's not a real human. I don't really care if someone doesn't like my message this week. Okay. But I can go back to my message and also, can I say it better? That's me looking at the game film. I just came off the field. Now let's look back.
Can I communicate it better?
Can I optimize? Can I automate? Can I improve it? So I'll look at my game film, even from our interview. Hey, what can I do different? Could I said something different? And so when we look at our own identity the same way, hey, is the guy that's showing up on these interviews, is there anything we can do to like make him be more fun, or like whatever the desire is?
Right. Yeah, I love that. I do the same exact thing, and always have, because you don't know how you're being perceived. And although you don't care about somebody else's opinion, if you really care about your craft and you want to become mastery level at anything that
That's
you're
right.
doing, you're reviewing it because you care, not
Yeah.
because you're trying to be some version of yourself that you're not.
That's right.
So I think that that's really important. Now, we talked a lot about if somebody's not getting what they want. And this might not be something that you talk about, but it just made me think of it. And it's a little personal too.
Yeah.
So we talked about somebody that isn't getting what they want. And when I think there's a lot of people that have a certain business goal or they want a certain level of wealth or net worth and they're not getting there, I think you just laid out, if people just stop this and rewind and go do everything you just said about developing that identity, finding what those characteristics are, creating those behaviors and the habits so that it becomes your reality,
Yeah.
I think is massively valuable. On the other side, what if you have someone who is repetitively successful, goes out and achieves everything that they think that they want, and then once they get there, they realize that it's not actually what they wanted, or they didn't get the feeling of achieving it that they thought they were going to get?
Well, that's one of the most common things for Olympians that stand on top of the podium. The anthem is playing, and I'm not going to bust out a percentage from my ass, but more than half feel empty. And that's in the moment. That's in the moment of you receiving the gold, silver, bronze, whatever. You've achieved some milestone in your career and life. And the reason is the way that I language it to people is it's the difference between goal setting to something and goal setting through something.
What's the difference?
So I think one of the best goals ever written was uttered by JFK when he said, by the end of this decade, we will land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. Okay? It's my terrible JFK.
It's actually pretty good.
Thanks, Candy. What's the most important part of that goal?
Coming back.
Coming back. Okay,
Yeah.
You're one of the few people who says that. Yeah, because the astronauts don't want to get left on the moon.
Yeah.
So it's great. Hey, gang, like, thanks for getting us to the moon, but have we thought about how we're going to be getting home? That's the through part. So we're going to get here and then we're going to come here. So many athletes, when I've done speeches over the last 27 years in front of, say, high schoolers or college athletes, they're like, hey, I want to make it to the NBA or the NFL or NHL or insert name of whatever league. And I'm like, do you really? And they think I'm challenging them on it. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, really? You want to make it to the NBA? And I just shut up, and because I want to see them squirm a little bit, because you always want to amp up emotion, because inside of emotion is an opportunity to make a shift for people. Because if I leave you in a state of indifference is actually the enemy of love, not hate. Hate and love. Hate's not the enemy of love. It's indifference, right? Like, nothing's worse than being inside of a relationship with someone who's indifferent with you.
Yeah.
But if they hate, at least there's something.
It's an emotion.
You're getting a reaction from them.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get a reaction. And they're like, yeah, I want to make it to the NBA. And I'm like, okay, so let's just play this out. So you get drafted by a team. And you make it to the preseason. And then you sit on the pine for game 1 of the regular season. And you're cut. Congrats, you made your goal. You landed on the moon. But is that what you really want? What you really want is the through part. I want to make it to the NBA, and I want to have a successful 15-year career being a valuable contributor to my team or teams that I'm on, and be seen as a powerful leader in the locker room that other players want to have around them. And that's what gives me my longevity inside of that 15-year career that I have. This or something better.
That's so different.
So different. So going back to the people who've achieved some sort of success, there's many reasons as to why they might not be happy with what they're sitting with. One can be they never thought about the through part. So getting a business to a certain level and then selling it. I work with a lot of people who have just sold a business for $250 million, and it's the exact same Candy as my Olympian standing on top of the podium.
Yeah.
Like they feel so empty because so much of their identity is the person who owns insert name of business. Because their entire identity is wrapped up in that. That's why there's an identity crisis with an athlete who's about to retire or why they stay longer. It's because they don't know what that next chapter is going to be. Who's that next version of me? And so that's what I'm trying to come in and do is build up that so that they don't backslide into a lot of very poor behavior. And I mean, I don't know how many pro athletes that, the wealth lady, Candy Valentino, works with, but you should be catching a lot of different sports athletes in their career and after their careers so that they're not a part of the 68% statistic in whatever league that is bankrupt or broke within 2.5 years of exiting their sport.
That's the stat, 68%.
Yeah, it's super high. And it goes up in some different leagues, right? NFL is higher.
Yeah.
NHL it's lower. So that I want to, if there's one thing for people to take away from today is really take a look at your goals that you've got and think about to and through. What's the difference in the way that I'm setting things for myself? Is there a difference between have I goal set to something, starting a business, or through something? Something that I like to share with people on stage, Candy, is I don't look at myself as an entrepreneur necessarily because it's an identity. I'm going to use identity as a useful way to help people show up on in a role that they have or a specific field, but identities can also trap us. So I've had a career and I'm having a career in business. I'm just transmuting it through entrepreneurial ventures. So I look at myself as being entrepreneurial. You had said something earlier about a lot of people say that they want something, but they don't want to do the work on it. Yeah, I say that's someone wants the noun without the verb.
Yeah.
A lot of people want the best-selling book.
Yeah.
They don't want to write the best-selling book or be the type of person who can actually now put content into a book that makes it a bestseller.
Right.
A lot of people want to have a business. They don't want to do the execution work of running that business, launching that business, right? Because it's challenging.
It's hard.
It's challenging, yeah. But it's also one of the great forcing functions for personal development if you know that that's what it's there for, right?
Yeah.
I think parenting is probably the number one forcing function, and then maybe being an entrepreneur, and the military is another great forcing function as well to leveling ourselves up.
It is.
So I just going back to that, I think if people evaluate, hey, am I goal setting to something or through something? Because when we're goal setting through something, there's actually a lot more meaning and purpose to it.
It's so fascinating. I didn't realize this myself, but when I started my first company in 19, I said, and I don't know where I got this from. I don't know if it was from just reading books because I grew up super poor and, my dad was a mechanic. And so I don't know where this came from, but somehow I heard something along the way that a very small percentage of female-owned businesses ever break $1 million, and a very, very small subset of those ever get valued enough to be exited.
Yeah.
And so whatever I heard, I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm 19 years old. I want to build a business that I can sell by the time I turn 40. Now, when I think back about it, I never thought this until you mentioned this. That was actually a through goal. It wasn't start a business. It wasn't hire somebody. It wasn't build another location. It was like, I really laid out 20 years of what the goal was without realizing it. I wasn't smart enough to realize that. It was by accident. But when I look at goals that I have now, because to me, that was a big checkbox. I did that twice. That was a big check. I look at goals now, it was to write a best-selling book. And I don't know if we'll actually leave this in, but just sharing vulnerably, when I found out that I was number 3 on Wall Street Journal bestseller, I was in the most amazing resort in Mexico that I love to go to.
Yeah.
It was Thanksgiving because it takes like a week for Wall Street to report.
Yeah.
We knew Atomic Habits was at number 1, so there's no way it was going above number 1.
Yeah.
We anticipated we'd be number 2, but I really wasn't concerned. I just thought if we could hit the list as a first-time author, I was excited.
Yeah.
That night, I don't even remember this. Anthony actually told me. That night I was in the room crying. And I remember not crying that I didn't do something. I was crying because I couldn't, I felt that I thought there'd be a different feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big emotional person. So he remembers those moments really well. And he was like, you just realized you wrote a book, you launched a book, you got on the list, and you're in tears. And I remember beating myself up because I was like, I know it's crazy, right? So then it's like, I know logically that this is a crazy reaction to setting a goal, accomplishing a goal, and then now you're somehow not fulfilled by it. And I've honestly had that feeling probably 2 or 3 additional times in these last couple years since coming out of my exit and doing everything, that checking the box, moving to Arizona, getting the big house, doing all this stuff. And then now it's like, you get the big invite on the stage and it's like, you know, like, oh, that's great. But then once you do it, there's like something missing. I don't know if there's like a formula or something that you take people through that when they are achieving the levels of what they want and there's something missing there. Is it the way that they're viewing it, or does it go back to that through line? Yeah, there's
a perception that you have with regards to this achievement that is limiting it impacting you at a deeper level. So, you had a experience and a milestone that it got onto a list, and it's there. It's in black and white of number 3, right? But there's another side to this, Candy. You exiting. So these are 2 very, very simple sentences in your bio. But when you internalize them differently, they're actually stepping stones for a platform to speak and connect to other people to help bring them up to this same type of experience that you've had. The 2 sentences are, Candy Valentino has built, scaled, and sold 2 different ventures. She's also written a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, okay? Those are assets for you. And so what would be great if going forward, so that you can kind of like own the emotional resonance of these assets that you've had, is that you think about them as simply story blocks for you to be taking out there to share with other people, not from a posturing standpoint or from an ego standpoint, but relating it back to how you grew up. Hey, I'm Candy Valentino. Yep. I'm up here in a nice pantsuit, perfectly coiffed hair, good makeup. You don't have to say all these things. But I want to take you back to the 8-year-old Candy Valentino that grew up with a mechanic dad who worked hard. I'll never forget, he always had grease underneath his nails, right? And you bring people back to extremely relatable experiences. And they start to see themselves in your story. And a part of that isn't so that they can also build, scale, and sell their own ventures, but it might actually cause someone to go, you know what? Like that girl who came from middle of nowhere or from not very much, or this guy who came from a single parent home or was an orphan or whatever the thing is, they go, maybe I'm going to actually go and pursue my art career. Like it's like, I think some people try to tell stories so that people can follow exactly in their footsteps instead of just inviting people into, here's the raw reality of how it looked, right? You know, Todd was an accidental entrepreneur. I was very explicit with the way that I went after entrepreneurship. There's different ways of doing this.
For sure.
But you know, just here's kind of how it happened. A lot of people stand up here and say, oh, I had it all figured out. Like I did this right and this right. Here's the 17 misfires I had through my career. Here's the $4.6 million that I lost in 3 different deals. Let me tell you a quick story. There's a wonderful researcher out of the University of Minnesota who brought a bunch of young school children, 6 to 8, into a room. And there was a puzzle box set up with a bunch of padlocks on it. Okay, and there was a set of keys to unlock all the padlocks. Problem was, none of the keys worked in any of the padlocks. And she was setting up an experiment to test resiliency and grit. So each kid, they get their keys and they're trying to work away at this padlocks, get it unlocked, this puzzle. And they're tracking all the data. Then, new set of kids individually gets brought in and they roll in a rack of Batman costumes and Dora the Explorer costumes, okay? Hey, pick your favorite costume. put it on. Hand them the keys. Get after it. Same keys, don't work. Same puzzle box, doesn't work. And they track the results. Well, what were the results? The kids that were just sitting there in their own plain clothes would say things like, oh, I'm not good at puzzles. This is too hard. I'm going to quit. This is difficult. But the kids that were wearing the costumes would say things like, Batman always finds a way, so I'm going to find a way. Dora always figures it out, so I'm going to figure it out. Batman never quits, so I'm not going to quit. Okay. They weren't expecting to track the vocalized self-talk of the kids. So I ask people, were those kids that were wearing the Batman and Dora the Explorer costumes being inauthentic? Were they? No.
No, it just pulled something different out of them.
Pulled something different out of them. Why? Because the judgment wasn't on this core, soft human being that's Jenny or little Timmy. The judgment was on Batman. The judgment was on Dora. It created this shield for them to protect this soft inner core that allowed them to bring their characteristics and traits and abilities out onto that, or to stick something out longer. That's what Super Richard did. He would continue to make those phone calls, and I get chills every time I think about it. That I did that intuitively. I leveraged my creative imagination to help me continue to pursue something that was extraordinarily challenging, because I would wake up and like, maybe this isn't right for me. Maybe I shouldn't run my own business. Okay, maybe I should go and work for somebody else.
Which everybody has those thoughts.
But my creative mind found a different gear, found a different pathway for me to go down. And I say that because, coming back to what you were saying, so many people are out there posturing with an idea of, oh, that's just my authentic self. No, you're an asshole.
Yes.
No, you're an asshole.
Amen.
Well, that's just authentically who I am. And so we use these terms, authenticity, authentic self. There's no such thing as an authentic self, okay? Because there's no one self. Now, when I'm trying to be the absolute best version of me as a dad, and in those moments, I can feel like I just nailed that disciplining conversation with Charlie. The outcome was great. I was able to maintain his self-esteem while also guiding him with the railway tracks of this is how we're supposed to do it. He feels good. I feel good. In that moment, I felt very authentic to the traits and the abilities and the way that I want to show up for my son. But those traits are going to be different to how I'm going to be as a CEO or as a coach.
Yeah. Because
the demands of a CEO is different than me being a great dad to my son. Yeah. There could be some shared values that might be there, but so the idea of an authentic self is broken. Authenticity, until it's applied through a proper framework of understanding, you've got many roles, you've got many selves that you play through. And if I can help you feel like you're being very authentic in this way and authentic over here, and authentic is for you, that you feel like it's the best parts of you coming out there and you're surprised even by your performance. That's why in chapter 3 of the book, I talk about the heroic self in this model that I have, the trapped self, the heroic self. It's heroic not because the world is gumdrops and rainbows. It's heroic because you decided how you want to show up.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that arrows are coming your way. And so I will 100% be throwing punches at bad ideas that I know hurt people.
So good. How many selves do you think people have?
Well, it's conditional upon the most important roles that you play in your life. So like I've got, there's the dad version of me. There's the husband version of me. There's the, guy who runs the business version of me, the CEO. But then even inside, this is what makes being an entrepreneur so difficult, is we wear many hats, especially in the very beginning.
Yeah.
That's why you want to keep your business model as simple as possible. This is the stuff that we talk to our mentoring clients about, is keep your business model as simple as possible so that you're not forcing yourself to wear 36 different hats or learn 14 different marketing channels to grow with. Right? So I've got for me, there's the coach identity. Then there's the speaker identity that I have. And again, like there can be very shared, but I'm trying to be I want to be different on stage than who I am when I'm coaching.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
And then there's the athlete self. There's the version of me that's supposed to take care of this body. Right. because this is the vehicle that kind of makes the rest of them work well. So that's the athlete version of myself. And so the way that I use my schedule is I schedule in my identities. People schedule in activities, but I have identities that take care of activities. So there's the CEO part of my day, and then there's the coach part of my day. Then there's the dad part of my day, and there's the husband part of my day. There's the athlete part of my day that's taking care of the body. And that's how I think about scheduling myself.
That's wonderful.
And what I do know is that, because it's a great question that you ask, Candy, around how many cells we have. We have many sides. Like there's the son, there's the brother, right? And if you're trying to be everything to everyone, it's going to be very difficult for you to achieve some of your own goals. This goes back to what my brother said to me. He's like, you're very good at helping other people with their goals, but you're not good at others or helping yourself. And how that would look is someone pings me and says, hey, Todd, can you help with this? Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
What was underneath that though? It's because I didn't want that person to dislike me. Because if I said no, I equated no with they're not going to like me. And that's leading a fairly desperate life in your relationships. So if you're trying to master so many selves, like I talk about, I'm one of the only, I think, peak performance guys out there who talks about, you know what? You need to schedule average. It's okay to be average.
Yeah.
Like Wednesday is my average day. And what I know from the data that we have is that when someone schedules average, NBA player schedules out of their 3 games this week, I tell them, one of these games, I want you to be average. After trying to unlock the gears in their head, they're like, what do you mean be average? I'm like, I don't want you to go in there with the expectation that you need to crush it tonight, okay? Let's just use it as an experiment, but I just want you to be average. Just take the break off of all those expectations that you have about how you need to show up. Just like relax a little bit more. Let's maybe just, whether it's being a little bit more playful in the locker room or whatever. Here's what the statistics say, because we track all this stuff since 1999 when I came up with this idea of be average. 86% of that person's performance that week, 86% of their games, their average game will be their best performance.
Their average game?
The game that they win with the attitude of being average will produce their best performance 86% of the time.
Wow. Why is that?
Because they removed the expectation of having to live through this perfect self.
Wow. Sounds kind of freeing, honestly, to have an average day.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever given myself permission to do that.
But why?
Sounds
Why?
kinda nice.
Why does it do that? Because it brings us into more of an attitude of playfulness.
Huh.
Playfulness is where the zone and flow state sits. Because it's the theta brainwave state. Kids between the ages of 6 months and 7 years of age operate in the theta brainwave. So there's beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Delta is like really deep rest and sleep. Beta is like the waking mind. You know, it's kind of like super active, paying attention to things. Alpha is more focused work. You know, like you're working on something and you're focused on it, not distracted as much. That's alpha. Theta is really the seat of the creative imagination. So kids are in theta. Why? Because we need them to be sponges at that age.
Yeah.
That age gap. So that they're learning a lot about life. Their critical thinking skills, the frontal lobe, isn't as active, judging everything that mom and dad are saying. We just need them to like, just listen. Like, just please don't put your hand in the fire.
Don't touch this. Right. Yeah.
Right? So they're observing and they're just sponges. They actually don't have what else? Kids at that age don't have an identity. You only develop a sense of me and my stuff and self at about 8, 9, 10, depending on the sex, female or male. And because, you know, girls will develop more quickly mentally than boys. That's why on the playground, they're like, why are those boys being so weird?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's because
even when they're 20, we're like, why are those boys being so weird?
Yeah, we're still lunatics. So all that's fascinating then. Well, that's also when we're so easily playing mechanic 1 second, pretending to be dad. And then we're playing dolls and then we're playing nurse with a friend and we're playing teacher. And then we're out in the front yard and we're pretending to be our favorite athlete, right? And none of those times are those kids feeling fake.
Right.
They're just glomming onto the characteristics and traits and trying to be more like Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan or LeBron James or, Tom Brady, whoever it is. Because they're like, oh, I want to play like that. And we're not making them feel like crap because they're trying to act through an alter ego. So that theta brainwave state and that creative imagination is the seat of incredible performance, which is why this idea of being average helps to bring people to it, because expectation of having to crush it creates stress.
Yeah. So what do you do? I'm saying, yeah, because I agree. Like it does,
So
it gets heavy. What do you do on an average day?
When I got here, you were recording a bunch of your FAQs, the questions that people sent to you, right? And so, and I know you, like you have excellence. I mean, your entire branding is about excellence as well, right? But what if we show up and we're like, you know what? I'm not going to try and crush any of these questions like I normally would. I'm going to I'm going to relax a little bit more with it, because that's the seat underneath it. It's like relaxing into it. And maybe what you find when you try to bring that energy through you is, oh, this feels a lot more like the side of me that I really like. A little more playful, a little more relaxed. I'm not trying to and I'm not judging, saying that that's what you're trying to do right now, but that's the experience of many people, that they think they need to be acting through. They think that the crushing it every day thing is a part of the useful persona that I need in order to win on that field. And my answer is, I don't know if that's true. Why don't we have some fun with this? And why don't we schedule an average day for you? Where you're not trying to hit the cold plunge at 5:30. You're not trying to hit the bulletproof coffee at 5:46. And it's like, what if you just played with the accordion, not at compression level, but we just expand it out a little bit more and not try and force something.
And then I guess it's like, you just get the result. And then if it's great, you duplicate it. And if it doesn't, right?
You just see.
Yeah, you just see.
Yeah, you're just the mad scientist in the lab figuring stuff out like we all are.
It's like giving people permission to take a breath.
Yeah.
And not have to, because there's so many high achievers and ultra performers and super successful business people that follow me and tune into the show. And I know that you need that to get to a certain level. Like Kobe wouldn't have been Kobe without being in the gym before everybody else and making sure that he was showing up. And so there's such a important factor to have that.
Yeah.
But then there can become a toxic factor to it as well.
There has to be, because nature tells us that something can't only be good. Right? So I think nature is the one of the best meta models out there as to grade whether or not something could be true or not. So if someone says, when you do this, you'll only get good results, that's not true.
Correct.
Okay. And I'll use alter egos as the example. Does everyone need an alter ego? No. But here's what I do know. If you're someone who's trying to pursue difficult things, you're going to bump up against the edge of your identity and what you can see yourself as. So what I know about successful people is they typically have the best tools that they can draw on when in a time of, whether it's crisis or challenge or opportunity. And that alter ego model is a great model for you to grab to help you move through the difficult or challenging part of shedding an identity to step into a new one for yourself. So does everyone need the alter ego? No, of course not. Still buy the book though.
We'll link all that below.
But in nature, water's a good example. Water isn't only good. When I'm floating in the middle of the ocean, last thing I want is another wave to crash on me, right? Hyperhidrosis, hypohidrosis. You can die by drinking too much water. And then you can die from not drinking any water.
Yeah.
Right? So toxic high achievement can be killing some area of your life, right? Not having enough achievement can be killing an area of your life, right? So there's this equilibrium, balance is such an overly used term, but it's like finding the right combination for you. That's why being that mad scientist in the lab with the way that, how do you work? So you get some great ideas from Candy, or you get some ideas from Todd, and then you put them to work for yourself. And through that process, you're going to start to develop your own sort of source code of success that works for you. And then eventually, hey, you might be standing on a stage one day saying, hey, this is kind of what I found for me. You don't need to use my exact recipe.
Right.
What was behind this was I was really a mad scientist in the lab. I was trying to just work on a lot of different things, and I figured out my kind of combination. I'm still figuring out my combination, right? And so hope you enjoyed the story, and, come and talk to me afterwards.
Yeah, because it's so true. Like the locks is such a great analogy with the kids, because it's like sometimes too, in certain areas of your life, you may have you've figured out the combination. Like you're okay, I know if I do this, I get this result. Exactly. This pays off in this way.
Exactly.
But then when either that goes away or changes in some way, or you try to take that same skill set into another area of your life, like I can't be in a relationship the same way that I am in business, because I'll just bulldoze whoever I'm in a relationship with, right? So I've had to learn that, like, to me, the cue is when I'm in the garage. When I come in the garage and I turn off the car, that's when work Candy, CEO Candy stops, and a much softer version of me is able to present. And until it becomes natural, like where it's natural is when I leave business and I'm going into the nonprofit world. For some reason, because of just visually, like you said, visual pictures, like the animals are there, you can see the impact. It's like, whoosh, you just soften into that person. But for the times that it doesn't happen naturally, I've just always had cues. And I, again, never really conceptually thought about that consciously, but I noticed that if I didn't do that, I would get a negative result. So what do we just do? Like, let's do the opposite of a negative result. I think Brendan Burchard always called them door frame triggers. And I think Tony always called it like changing your state. And I used to have, when I was younger, the opposite. When I would go into a meeting, my heart would be racing with all these people. And I would like have a move that I would make, and I would like I'm Candy Valentino. I would say I'm Candy effing Valentino. And then I would walk into the meeting, but like that was like the version of me that I had to be in order to figure it out. So it's so funny that you say people might think that that's authentic, but I've actually done it in so many other versions just naturally as a survival mechanism in order to get through something.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's fascinating.
That's beautiful.
It's so fascinating. Please tell everyone, I want to be respectful of your time because I feel like I could talk to you all day. Where can everyone find the book, and how can they find out about the coaching that you offer? Because I think it's so immensely valuable. I do not recommend many people often because most people don't have the data. They haven't been doing the reps, and you've been doing this. You have a framework. So where can everyone find it? That's how we originally met.
That is how through coaching opportunity. So toddherman.me is my home base on the internet, and that has links out to kind of like all the different tools and, businesses that I have going on that can help entrepreneurs or, athlete or alter ego world in the book, so toddherman.me is the best way to go.
Perfect.
But you can find the alter ego book in bookstores and on, Amazon and all the different online retailers as well. And then my favorite thing is when I do like a show like this is if people are on whatever social media platform, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to this on Candy's podcast, screenshot your screen right now and then do a story or tag me and you and just let me know like favorite takeaway, because I will 100% respond. And, DM, because all the different platforms that we play on, my team and I, we go in there, and I just love getting the, very real responses that we typically get from people about something that might have popped off in their head, or if you've used an alter ego in your past and you just didn't even realize you were using it, kind of like what you're talking
what I just said. Yeah, right.
Let me know, because I've got other books that are coming out, and I love getting these stories because they're going to feed into another book. So
I love that. Yeah. So tag at Todd Herman.
At Todd _Herman.
Herman. And obviously the show, share it. We'll make sure that that's great information for everyone. And please go grab the book. Everyone that's watching, listening, go grab the book. I am not, I don't want to say fascinated by many people. I'm not, because I meet a lot of people.
You would.
But I love what you do. I think it's fascinating, and I love meeting somebody that's a true expert in their craft and in their field, and that's you. So thank you so much for coming on and spending this time with us today.
Appreciate it, Candy. Thank you so much.